What's up YouTube, Josh Bacon here, also known as JB the Car Fanatic, and today you join me in front of the fireplace where I will now read you a Christmas story that I wrote. Now if you've seen the book, A Top Gear Christmas, chances are you'll have seen a Christmas story based on Rudolph the Red Nosed Reindeer called Rudolph the Red Nosed Roller. Now the story in that book actually inspired me to do my own version of the story called Rudolph the Red Nosed Ferrari. There are a few differences between my version and the Top Gear version, most notable of which, instead of Rolls Royces, there are 6 sentient Ferraris named after Santa's reindeer. And now I shall read it to you, so just sit back, relax and enjoy. Rudolph the Red Nosed Ferrari. In Jeremy Clarkson's backyard, the Ferraris gambled and played. There was Donna, a 1988 F40, known for being the first ever production car to break the 200 miles an hour barrier. There was Blitzen, a 2015 California T, draped in Ferrari's signature Rosso Corsa paint, a colour that is, to many people, the only colour you should ever buy a Ferrari in. There was also Vixen, a beautiful 2010 458 Italia, a car hailed by Clarkson himself as one of the most beautiful Ferraris ever made. Then there was Prancer, who was a 1962 250 GTO, famous for being one of the most expensive cars ever sold at car auctions, with some even selling for as much as £28 million, and possibly even more than that. And last but not least, there was Cupid, a 2005 F430, the successor to the Ferrari 360. The Ferraris loved their lives. Every day they'd line their stable until Jeremy Clarkson came down with a container full of petrol and a big old chamois leather, and he'd feed them and polish them, and they'd purr silently at his affectionate and caring touch. One day, Jeremy Clarkson would tell them, one day you'll need to transport all the presents I've been making in my workshop to the orphans of the world. And the Ferraris listened, only half understanding, as Jeremy Clarkson told them of his life's mission, to bring expensive handmade toys with a nostalgic element to the parentless children of the world. Just think, Jeremy Clarkson would infuse as he polished Vixen's wheels. There are little children in Soweto who've never had a game of Jenga, orphans in Bishkek who don't know what it's like to play with handmade alphabet bricks. And that's where you come in, my little Ferraris. And the Ferraris would listen, only slightly less intently, as they'd heard all this before. In fact, it was all Jeremy Clarkson talked about, apart from the CLK 63 AMG Black Series that he used to own. There was that one time he'd gone a bit off topic and talked about how he used to own a Ford GT that unfortunately suffered from numerous faults, including a faulty immobiliser and a malfunctioning alarm system and anti-theft tracking device, but pretty soon he'd wrested the subject back to providing top-of-the-range homemade toys to orphans. But for the most part, the Ferraris gambled and played in the extensive grounds of Jeremy Clarkson's ancestral home. They were all happy, with one exception. Ferraris, as you know, are stunning beasts, with their beautiful lines, their powerful engines, and of course, the prancing horse, a symbol which, according to the parents of World War I pilot Francesco Baracca, if Enzo Ferrari painted it on his cars, it would bring him good luck. The Ferrari is rightly proud of its beautiful looks and classic history. There was, however, one exception, and his name was Rudolph. In all aspects save one, Rudolph was a perfectly normal Ferrari, a 1982 Mondial 8, with a rather decent V8 engine, pop-up headlights and a fine handling chassis, but in the middle of the front bumper, which in the other Ferraris was where the grille needed to cool the engine would be, Rudolph, alone of all the other Ferraris, had a shiny red nose. A nose so shiny it gave out a light brighter than 1,000 headlights. It beamed out red like 1,000 models' windows in Soho. The other Ferraris teased Rudolph mercilessly about his red nose. "Have you got a cold?" sneered Donna. "You look like you're on a standby," said Blitzen. "No," corrected Vixen. "It looks like a taxi but bought a red nose for comic relief and the driver could be bothered to take it off again." "I couldn't agree with you more, Vixen," said Prancer. "Me neither," said Cupid. Rudolph never replied to their taunts. He knew he was just as good as them, but he was ashamed of his nose. He knew that being different was no fun at all. "When Jeremy Clarkson gets a squad of Ferraris together to deliver his handmade toys to the orphans of the world," said Donna haughtily, "do you think he'll include you, Rudolph, with your stupid red nose like Big Pimpo?" Donna and the other Ferraris laughed, and Rudolph went into his lonely stable and cried. Jeremy Clarkson's Heath Robinson designed alarm clock fired a tiny cannon into the backside of a rubber monkey on a string, which propelled the monkey on a string across the room into a cup placed on a set of scales. The monkey's weight caused a candle on the other half of the scales to rise up and light a thin blue touch paper, firing a small rocket at a set of dominoes on a conveyor belt. The conveyor belt began to move, and as the dominoes fell off its end, each one hit a tiny hammer placed against a large bell, causing it to ring. The bell rang and rang and rang until Jeremy Clarkson pulled his nightcap off his head, thrust his feet into fluffy slippers, and got out of bed. Jeremy Clarkson looked at his calendar. Christmas Eve! It was time! Time to initiate Operation Deliver Classy Handmade Toys to the Orphans of the World! He dressed quickly and ran outside. But instead of the clear crispiness of a December morn like what he had been hoping before, the day lay dull and grey, wreathed in a deep, glum fog. Jeremy Clarkson could hardly see across the stable yard, let alone into the sky that he had hoped to fill with darting, determined Ferraris. "Well, this is a to-do," said Jeremy Clarkson. He assembled the Ferraris, many of whom were rather groggy from Blitzen's stag night the day before, and gathered them round him. "Donna, are you here?" said Jeremy Clarkson. "Here!" said Donna. "Blitzen!" said Jeremy Clarkson. "Here!" said Blitzen. "Vixen! Here!" Prancer! "Here!" Cupid! "Here!" "Ferraris!" shouted Jeremy Clarkson. "Turn your headlights on!" Now, Ferraris have excellent headlights, but even the combined force of all their lights was barely enough to penetrate the gloom. Plus, to make matters worse, they all had headaches from drinking Pachimento Rosso, so they weren't really up for it. "Oh no," said Jeremy Clarkson. "My plan is doomed." Then he saw it. At the back of the stable, there was a light which could illuminate any darkness known to man. "Of course!" shouted Jeremy Clarkson, causing several of the Ferraris to groan loudly. "Rudolph!" And he ran into the stable to find Rudolph, bright-eyed and alert, because of course nobody had invited him to Blitzen's stag, looking at him in puzzlement. "I need you, Rudolph!" shouted Jeremy Clarkson. "Me?" stammered Rudolph. "But nobody needs me. I'm a loser." Jeremy Clarkson looked down at Rudolph. "Rudolph, with your nose so bright," he said, "won't you guide my sleigh tonight?" "Yes!" shouted Rudolph. "There's no time to lose," said Jeremy Clarkson. Together they raced outside, and Jeremy Clarkson gathered all the handmade gifts he'd made for the orphans of the world and loaded them onto a sleigh the size of Modena. He then assembled the Ferraris in front of the sleigh, with Cupid at the back and Rudolph at the front. "Ferraris!" said Jeremy Clarkson. "Can all of you pull that sleigh?" "Yes!" shouted the Ferraris, and Jeremy Clarkson hitched his sleigh to Cupid. "Rudolph!" shouted Jeremy Clarkson. "Are you ready?" "Yes!" shouted Rudolph. "Will you please stop shouting?" said Donna. "I've got a head like nobody's business." Jeremy Clarkson got behind Rudolph's steering wheel and started his engine. And Rudolph, Donna, Blitzen, Vixen, Prancer and Cupid all flew into the air. That night, Jeremy Clarkson and the Ferraris delivered handmade gifts and toys to the orphaned children of 6 continents, and when they got home, the other Ferraris went back to their stable. And now Rudolph is best friends with Jeremy Clarkson and all the orphans of the world. And even now, if you look out of your window on Christmas Eve, they say you can see a red light in the sky. And if you look even more closely, you can see 6 Ferraris, one of them with a red nose and being driven by a certain former Top Gear presenter, pulling a sleigh laden with homemade gifts and toys. The end. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please make sure to like, share and comment on this video, and also make sure to subscribe to my channel as well. You can do that by clicking above the fireplace or on the red subscribe button below. Have a very Merry Christmas, and this is Josh Bacon, also known as JB the Car Fanatic, signing off. Peace!